People ask me this all the time, and it's, should I cold plunge if I'm sick? And the short answer is no, you should not cold plunge if you're sick. But let's talk about why, what the research actually says, and then how to know when it's safe to start actually cold plunging again. So just some quick background here. Cold plunging can absolutely be beneficial for a lot of different systems in your body, and building immune resilience is absolutely one of those systems. And the reason for that is because cold plunging is what's known as a hormetic stressor. And what this means is basically a small challenge that helps your body adapt over time. The key though is that your body has to be able to adapt to the challenge, and this happens in healthy individuals who aren't already being stressed by other things. And the thing is that when you're sick, this takes your body away from that normal adaptive response and into more of a protective mechanism. Think about this as running a marathon. And if you're actively running a marathon, you don't want to be doing a bunch of sprint intervals, which would be great during training because it's going to help your body adapt and help you get faster. But in the middle of a marathon, probably not the best time to do a sprint interval. And so we can kind of think of cold plunging as a sprint interval. It's great during training. It's great when you're in a recovery mode or when you're trying to grow and build, but it's not great during a marathon. Being sick, kind of like a marathon. So we don't want to be adding in additional insults or additional challenges to the system when your body's already trying to conserve and push all of its energy towards fighting the infection. So during the acute phase of an illness, especially viral illnesses, there's a lot of different shifts that are going to start to happen in the body. So we're going to start to see a big increase in inflammatory cytokines. There's going to be a lot of immune cell trafficking and migration to different parts of the body so that they can be utilized effectively. We're going to have an increase in metabolic rate, and a lot of times we're going to feel that as a fever or warmth or like having the chills, things like that. There's going to be a lot more sympathetic activation, which is going to take you away from that normal rest and digest. And all of this is going to require a lot more energy. And so if the body's shifting a lot of its energy towards fighting an infection, it's not going to have as much energy to build and grow and build that resilience that you're looking for with a cold plunge. The increase in metabolic rate and fever response is especially important when it comes to cold plunging. What happens when your body is sick is it wants to make sure that it can create an environment that's as unhospitable for the foreign invader or the pathogen as possible, and raising the heat makes it much harder for viruses and bacteria to replicate and slows their development and progression within the body. That increase in temperature also increases the enzymatic activity and makes your immune system more effective. Now, with cold plunging, we're doing the exact opposite of what the body is trying to do. The body's trying to increase temperature to make it a inhospitable environment for the bacteria, pathogens, viruses, whatever it is, and also improving enzymatic activity. You go get in a cold plunge, you drop your core body temperature, you're making it a more hospitable environment, and you're decreasing the activity of the enzymes within the immune system. Neither one of these are beneficial for supporting short-term immune response. So when it comes to cold plunging in illness, think increasing temperature, productive, things like saunas. Decreasing body temperature is going to be very counterproductive. Now, in a healthy body, cold plunging triggers an acute stress response. And what this means is that we're going to see things like an increase in epinephrine and norepinephrine. We're going to see an increase in cortisol, your body's main stress hormone. All of that goes along with an increase in sympathetic tone. We're going to see a short-term decrease in immune system activity, which is really important because if our body is sick, we don't want to create a short-term decrease in immune system activity that is going to make it harder for our body to heal and recover from the illness. So that's really important as part of the hormetic stress that helps our body grow and adapt, but not good for us in the short term. And we're also going to see that drop in core body temperature. Again, this creates cold shock protein reactions, and this helps our body grow and adapt over time, but not something that we want to be doing in the short term. I've got a whole video that talks all about the normal responses to cold plunging and how that helps our body grow and adapt over time. We're not going to get super into that for the purposes of today's video, but if you'd like to, you can go check the link in the description below for that other cold plunging video that talks all about the normal responses to cold plunging. But the key thing to understand here is that cold plunging takes your body into more of an acute stress response, which is what helps us grow and adapt over time. The key there, though, is that if we want to grow and adapt to that short-term stress, we've got to have a reserve. When your body's sick, it doesn't have the same reserve it normally has because all of its energy is being put into the immune system activation to fight the infection. Your body cares more about getting rid of the infection that's in it than growing and adapting and building resilience over time. So the key takeaway here is just understanding that adding cold plunging in when you're already sick is kind of like running sprints in the middle of a marathon. And we just understand intuitively it's probably not the best idea. Now, here's the key thing to remember here is that a lot of what I've just discussed is all based on physiology. It's not based on actual research. The reality is there's not any research at all or very little research that talks about cold plunging when you're actually sick. Most of the research is looking at the long-term adaptation. They do look at the immune system function, and there are some small immune system resilience functions that happen over a long period of time, but no one's really looked at what happens when you're actually sick. So a lot of what we just talked about is mechanistic, and it's based on your body's physiology. Now, the other part of that is that we don't necessarily need research to understand what's good for us and what's bad for us. Yeah, it helps to confirm what we are assuming, but if we just look at basic physiology, we can understand that if your body is stressed, we don't want to add more stress on top of it. We want to support what the body's trying to do, get back to a normal, healthy state, and then we can start to use those hormetic benefits to increase short-term stress to build long-term resilience. We don't want to be doing both of those things at the same time. The 5 things I want you to take away from this are just number 1, if you're sick, your immune system obviously is already activated. Cold exposure provides an acute immunosuppressive response, which is not helpful if we're trying to fight something and we're trying to activate the immune system. Cooling the core can also take the environment of the body away from that helpful environment we're trying to create, and it can make it more comfortable for pathogens to live in. The stress response from cold plunging adds to the stress response of illness, just like running sprints during a marathon is not a good idea. And when you're sick, fever or an increase in core body temperature to an extent is definitely your friend and not something to be afraid of. All right, so now that we've kind of understood that cold plunging when you're sick is not a great idea, let's talk about how we can know when to actually get back into the cold plunge and what that progression looks like for people. Now, unless you're someone who runs labs all the time and you know what your baseline immune response is, what your immune response looked like when it was being activated or when you were sick, and you're testing your immune response coming off the illness, you're not really going to have a good physiological understanding of when to start getting back into the cold plunge or what your body's doing. And that's totally fine. We can use symptomatology in the way that you're feeling in a lot of cases to kind of gauge when to get back into the cold plunge. So the big thing is once your energy, your appetite, and your sleep start returning and normalizing, that's when you kind of know it's a good idea to start getting back into the cold plunge. If you're using something like a Whoop strap or an Oura ring or one of those other data trackers, you'll be able to actually see what your sleep is doing, what your recovery looks like, what your resting heart rate and HRV look like, and all of those returning to normal are a good indicator that it's okay to start getting back into the cold plunge. Now, depending on how long you weren't feeling good is going to kind of dictate how you need to ease and progress back into the cold plunge. If you were sick for 3 weeks and you didn't cold plunge for 3 weeks, that return to plunging may look a little bit different than if you were only sick for a day or 2. The reality is the body builds this resilience to cold plunging over time. I'm sure if you cold plunge on a regular basis, you know that the temperature you're plunging at now is not the temperature you plunged at when you first got in. And we've got to work back to the point that you were at before. So for some people, this looks like maybe just taking cold showers to start with before actually getting back into the cold plunge. And this can also be a good way to ease back in just because you're going to understand how your body's going to handle the cold water again. If you start feeling good, you take a cold shower, and then all of a sudden you feel really crappy and you get the chills and you feel like it took you a step backwards. Well, it was good that you only did a cold shower and not a full cold plunge that could have thrown your body back into that illness state. So cold showers can definitely be a good way to ease back in. And then when it comes to getting back into the actual cold water, we probably don't want to go in for as long as you were in before, right? So for me personally, I typically will cold plunge around 43 to 45 degrees for anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes. Now, if I haven't cold plunged in a while, I'm definitely not going to try to cold plunge at 43 degrees for 4 minutes because that's going to be miserable and my body's not going to tolerate that as well as it had maybe a month before. So testing it out is important. I would try to get back in for maybe 30 to 60 seconds the first couple times you cold plunge, just to kind of, again, test your body and see where that resilience lies at. Because you may, again, feel normal at a baseline, but then as soon as you start stressing your body, you may realize that adaptability and resilience is not quite back where it needs to be yet. So the big thing there is just kind of easing into it. And this can look different for everybody. Obviously, everybody's cold plunging journey is different. Some people do 50 degrees for a couple minutes. Some people do 35 degrees for a couple minutes. And so I'm not going to give any definitive answers of like, this is the temperature and the time that you need to do. But start with something that was easier, either a warmer temperature or a shorter duration than what you were doing previously, to kind of just test and see how your body's doing. And over time, you will develop that strength and resilience, and you'll get right back to where you were at before, to where you can start to build that immune response and immune resilience again. The bottom line here is that if you're sick, you need to stop the cold plunge. Once you are feeling better again, you can start easing back into it, because the reality is cold plunging is one of the best things that you can do to build immune resilience in the long term. We know it helps with the cytokine signaling. We know it helps with the inflammatory processes in the body, and we know it can build immune resilience. We've just got to make sure that we're using it at the right period of time, and that we're smart enough to know when to back off and give your body a chance to start to heal and develop and repair. I hope you guys found this information helpful. If you did, like and subscribe to the channel, and drop your comments below of how you felt cold plunging. If you've tried the cold plunge when you were sick, how you felt, and how you kind of use the cold plunge to help in your own adaptability and recovery routines.